All right, welcome back to CBS This Morning. I'm Anthony Mason with Gayle King and Tony Dokoupil. We're learning dramatic new details about one of the most high-profile investigations in the country. On 60 Minutes last night, correspondent Sharon Alfonsi took us inside the jail cell where convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein was found dead in August. After a 5-month investigation, 60 Minutes obtained photos of the autopsy and the jail cell. Some of them, we caution you, are quite disturbing. Sharon spoke to a forensic pathologist, Dr. Michael Baden, who was hired by Mark Epstein to investigate his brother's death.
It appears he had some kind of sleep apnea machine. You can see a long electrical cord.
Yes, there were other wires and cords present that it would have been easy to use to hang oneself within a few minutes.
But the key reason Dr. Baden thinks Jeffrey Epstein's death might be a homicide is because of the unusual fractures he saw in Epstein's neck.
There were fractures of the left, the right thyroid cartilage, and the left hyoid bone.
This is an autopsy photo of Epstein's broken hyoid bone, a U-shaped bone that sits under the jaw that part of the tongue attaches to. The thyroid cartilage sits at the front of the neck.
I have never seen 3 fractures like this in a suicidal hanging.
And Dr. Michael Baden joins us. Good morning, Dr. Baden. Thanks for being here.
Good morning.
You observed the entire 4-hour autopsy of Jeffrey Epstein.
I did.
What stood out to you the most in that?
What stood out to me the most was that the ligature mark was made after a few hours. He'd been dead for a few hours at the time he was discovered. And that there were multiple fractures of the Adam's apple, the thyroid cartilage, and the thyroid and the hyoid bone that are more indicative of a homicidal strangulation than a suicidal strangulation.
So in 1,000 cases that you've reviewed in the New York State prison system since Attica,
right,
you've never seen a 3-bone fracture in a suicide.
That's correct.
But the New York State medical examiner, which also looked at this, they say, no, we have seen it and we think it's a suicide.
So I've been reviewing all the records since Attica as to when a suicide occurs. We haven't, in New York State's prison, seen that kind of fractures, number one. Number two, maybe our experiences are different, but this certainly suggests that it could be a homicide.
But it's important, though, to point out, too, that, because 60 Minutes also, to Tony's point, also talked to other pathologists who also agree with the suicide findings. You're being paid by the Epstein family. Isn't it in your best interest to go along with what they believe happened?
They don't believe that happened. They want to know what happened. I think that the brother or the estate would just as soon have this to be a suicide because there's no advantage to them to be a homicide. Mark Epstein is now concerned about a homicide. If his brother was killed because he knew too much, is he also at jeopardy? Other people at jeopardy. So
they don't suspect that their brother was murdered?
Well, because of the autopsy findings, they feel the brother may have been murdered.
Exactly.
But as a medical examiner, when I was chief medical examiner in New York City, just because I would find a jail suicide doesn't mean that I was on the side of the city or the state. We have to call it the way we see it. Yep. So it doesn't matter when I'm being paid by New York City or being paid by the family.
I want to go back to the point you made. We don't know the position of Epstein's body when he was found dead.
That's correct.
And that's a crucial question.
It's a very big question.
Because the marks on the neck is not at all typical for a hanging suicide. A hanging suicide, 90% of the time, there are no fractures. Maybe 10%, 15%, there could be a hyoid or a thyroid fracture.
Right.
You don't have 3 fractures with the weight of the body on the ligature. You have to have a lot more pressure by ligature or by hands to get those fractures.
You also say that the wounds on Epstein's neck, and we have pictures of those. As we caution you, these are disturbing pictures. Do not match the noose that was found in his cell.
That's right. There are a number of things on the noose. The noose is a very narrow noose, and there's a little imprint on one of the nooses of a pressure of a mark that could not have come from the smooth sheet.
On his neck, not the noose, you're saying.
That's attached, part of the noose, that it's on the neck, adjacent on the skin, that looks more like an imprint from a rope rather than from a smooth bed sheet. And there's nothing on the bed sheet that blood or that would indicate it was around his neck. And the FBI or the medical examiner would have done swabs for DNA on the ligature. Whose DNA is on it? Was it Epstein alone, or was it Epstein and somebody else?
And so important because we're talking about justice for his alleged victims, and also
that's right.
The question of did he have other stories to tell?
But there's no advantage to the family that this is a homicide or suicide. There's no money involved. No.
All right.
They just want the truth.
That's right.
Dr. Michael Baden, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.